We are glad you're here. I'm Ray Johnston. I'm one of the pastors around this place. I would like to invite you to reach in and pull out this outline. We are in week 2 of a great, brand new, life-changing series called Live Call. Okay? If you were here a week ago, if you weren't here, we have wristbands we can invite you to wear for 40 days. Put one of those on. You can go, what if it doesn't match? We have 2 colors. Grab. And while you're doing that, I want to begin by telling you a quick story. Not very many moments change your life, okay? I was in seminary and studying to be a pastor, and to be honest with you, I don't remember a heck of a lot of what happened in seminary. I crammed 3 years into 5 because I was working to put myself through it. But one moment in one class changed the course of my life. It was a class on 1 Corinthians. And he got to the section 12, 13, and 14 are about spiritual gifts. And this professor, all of a sudden, puts his stuff down after he's done teaching spiritual gifts. He puts his stuff down, and he goes and he leans on his podium, and he just says, look, here's the secret. He goes, if you want to have an exciting life, if you want to have a life that actually matters, if you want to have a life where you have less insecurity and more confidence, if you want to have a life where, like, when you get to the end of your life, you look back over it and you go, what a ride. I wouldn't change a thing. And you want to have maximum impact instead of maximum frustration and the typical Christian mediocre, low impact life. All you have to do is one thing. I'm like, whip out a pen. What is it? And he changed the course of my life with one sentence. He said, find out what your spiritual gifts are and build your whole life around them. And then he looked and said, anything else will lead to mediocre, discouragement, and failure. And it changed my life. And I've been doing that every single day of my life ever since. And we, in one message, are going to invite you to go down that same road. Because that's the road God created you to go down. It's the road the minute you became Christian, God put spiritual gifts in you so you could discover, develop those, and go down that road. Anything else, if you don't get this message today, you will end up with a limited, mediocre life of discouragement where you are not playing to your strengths, and you will miss the very reason God created you. This is a really big deal. So Kurt and I are going to tag team this message. We're going to come out swinging. Are you all ready? Yes. Good. Grab a pen. Here we go. We're going to give you sort of an A to Z. What does the Bible teach about spiritual gifts in a really short period of time? Here we go. 4 essential questions. Number 1, does every person have a spiritual gift? Does every Christian have a spiritual gift? Now, as soon as you've written that down, quick question. Raise your hand if you consider yourself to be a highly gifted person. Put up your hand. Great, like 10% of you, okay? We're gonna fix that. Look at these verses, okay? Like some of you going, do I have spiritual gifts? Check this out. 1 Corinthians says the second line there, now to each one, the gift of the Spirit is given for the common good. So to each one, turn to the person next to you and say, that means you. All right? Now you go, well, that's just one verse. Here it is, verse 11. All these are the work of the one and same Spirit, and he gives them to each one. Turn to them in a little louder voice and say, that means you. All right, now some of you go, well, that's just the Apostle Paul. Did anybody else say this? Peter, the Apostle Peter says this, as each one has received a special gift. Now, really loud, say, that means you. Now, raise your hand if you consider yourself to be a highly gifted person now. You are. God says you are. Now, here's the problem. There's all kinds of misconceptions about spiritual gifts. So rapidly, I want to give you the top 3 things people think that isn't true. Number 1 is this: spiritual gifts are for perfect people. Spiritual gifts are for perfect people. In other words, I'm not perfect. I don't have any gifts. God couldn't possibly use me. I don't have that perfect background. And some of you are going, only when I'm super spiritual, like these 3 people. Some of you are slowly getting this. Only when I reach a high point of spiritual maturity, only when I tithe 90% of my income, only when I read my Bible for 3 hours a day will I. No, the minute you became a Christian, you received spiritual gifts. Number two is this: spiritual gifts are identical to the fruit of the Spirit. The problem is this: spiritual gifts are often confused with the gifts of the Spirit. Okay? There is the fruit of the Spirit and the gifts of the Spirit. And here's the deal: the fruit of the Spirit is, well, here it is. Fruit shows my maturity. Gifts show my ministry. The fruit of the Spirit is things like this: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness. So those are the marks of mature people. Some of the most highly gifted people are the least spiritually mature people I've ever met. Just because somebody's amazingly gifted doesn't mean they're spiritually mature. There are a lot of people that lead but don't live or love like Jesus. Okay? And the third misconception is when spiritual gifts guarantee that everything will go smoothly. Like, when I'm using my spiritual gift, junior high kids will pay attention. High school kids will think adults are cool. Your kids will actually go, everything will go smoothly. You will never get sued for building a building, all of this kind of stuff, okay? Notice this great verse: let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if what? If we don't give up. I used to think, well, early on I was like, well, if I'm doing God's will, then God will make everything go smoothly and miracles will happen. I learned early that wasn't the case. I was a youth pastor in Southern California. Well, get this, our church, tiny little church, we had 2 junior high kids. And we went, and no other church in town had any. I mean, there were almost no Christian junior high kids. So we went, let's start an outreach. So we went, when are the kids available? You know what we did? We started a thing called TBC, the Tuesday Breakfast Club, and we held it Wednesday morning. Okay? And then we started at 6:29, but here was the deal: all you can eat for breakfast, 50 cents. These kids, 15 kids, showed up at the first one. We're like 2 to 15 revivals broken out. Half the kids in the room prayed and accepted Christ at the very first one. Okay? And then at the end of that breakfast, we said to now this is like saying sick them to a bull to junior high kids. We said, if you bring 5 friends next week, you eat free. The next week, there were 50 junior high kids. The next week, there were like 75. And the 4th week was this breakfast. It was like a Christmas breakfast right before Christmas break. There were 115 junior high kids packed into this thing, okay? And tables, French toast all over the place, all this kind of stuff. And then we have skits going on. And I'm at the side room. I'm kind of standing at the side in the back. And my buddy Bernie is standing right next to me. And we have a skit going on right before I'm going to get up and preach the gospel to these kids. And the skit's going on. And we have this volunteer whose name was Steve, who loved to be the center of attention, and he was uncoordinated and slightly dangerous. This is not a good combination. But he couldn't stand not being the center of attention. So we were doing this skit that involved having Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So we dressed him up in a reindeer costume and we strapped huge antlers to his head, real antlers, okay? And we said to Steve, look, stand on stage. Don't move. You are a prop. These antlers are sharp. Those kids are not. So and so we just stand there. Well, Steve couldn't take it. And I'm in the back during the skit. And Bernie, I'm looking at what I'm going to say. And Bernie says, what's Steve doing? And I said, oh God. Right before I looked up, 2-word prayer, I looked up. And Steve couldn't take it anymore. And he has jumped off the stage and is jumping from table to table to table, making reindeer noises, whatever those are. About the 5th table, just as I look up, he hops onto one of the middle tables. He jumps and lands on a plate of French toast, which slides out from underneath him. He crashes down on the table and gores a kid in the forehead. Blood is streaming down this kid's face, and it is 7:30 in the morning. I, serving Jesus, using my gifts, leading junior high kids to Christ, am at the stupid hospital trying to explain how this kid was gored by Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer at our church breakfast, okay? Just because you're using your gifts doesn't mean everything will go smoothly. And if you don't get this, you will be Mr. or Mrs. Resignation and you will quit everything. That make sense? Okay, second question is this. Why are spiritual gifts so important? 3 quick reasons. Number 1 is this. They elevate your purpose. Your spiritual gifts help you discover your purpose in life. Almost every survey shows, almost all Americans are in the wrong job, and almost all of them have risen the wrong ladder to discover it's against the wrong wall. And when you start asking questions like this, man, what's God's will for my life? What does God want me to do with my life? What kind of career should I have? What kind of major should I pursue? All that kind of stuff. Step 1 is find out what your spiritual gifts are, and it will change everything. Number 2 is this. Your spiritual gifts expand your potential. They expand your potential. You will never grow to your maximum potential until you are discovering and using your gifts. I can prove it. Watch this. Just somewhere on your outline, take your pen right now and write your first and last name. Just write it. Just go ahead and jot it down. Write your first and last name anywhere you can on a piece of paper. All right. Now, take your pen and switch hands. And now, write your first and last name. Go for it. Write your first and last name. All right? And, okay, I know it takes a while. Is anybody here still writing with the wrong hand? Okay. So, when I did it with my right hand, here it is above, and that's the disaster when I wrote with my left hand below. Now, how many of you are still writing with the wrong hand? Okay, you know what? By the way, you're writing with the wrong hand. It's more frustrating. It's harder. It's not turning out. The average Christian will spend their entire life living writing with the wrong hand. Wow. Your spiritual gifts will prevent that. Third benefit is this. Spiritual gifts eliminate both guilt and inferiority. They eliminate both guilt and inferiority. I love this. The Bible says this. There are different spiritual gifts. There are different ways of serving, but the same Lord is served. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is this. When you know what your gifts are, you don't feel inferior or insecure because of what your gifts aren't. That's right. Because if you fail at something, instead of getting discouraged like, I'm a failure, no, that's just not my. I'll give you an example. I was a youth pastor for years, and we had no money, so I thought, I got to learn to lead worship. Now, this is back in the days. If you're old, it was back in the days. Remember the days where if you had a guitar and learned 3 chords, you could lead worship? You could actually lead worship. So I bought a guitar, I learned 3 chords, and then I learned like 3 worship songs. And it was like 4 months later, and this church said, hey, Ray, you lead worship, right? And I'm like, I think so. And they were like, why don't you lead worship on Sunday night? Give it a shot. And I was like, all right. So now it's low risk because it's a Sunday night service and nobody comes. So I get up there and I have my guitar. I'm all excited. It's like the first time I ever led worship. And I get my guitar out. And we had this thing called an overhead projector. High school students, you will have no idea what an overhead well, watch this. How many of you know what an overhead projector is? Okay, if your hand just went up, you're old. And they were these things that projected stuff. And they had these transparencies. And they would throw them, slide them off. They kept going like this. So I'm up front. First ever worship song I ever lead, Sunday night service, and I'm leading this song. I'm leading one song. They've put the wrong words to a different song up, and some lady has hopped up on the piano and is playing something that isn't this song. Halfway through the song, the thing breaks down because everybody starts laughing. So I quit that song halfway through, and I go, you want to try another song? Everybody cheers. So I try another song. They put the wrong slides up there backwards, and the piano lady's playing something she wanted to play. And halfway through, that breaks down. I'll go, should we give it up? And they're like, no, one more song. So I start playing a third song. I'm at a blast. I'm singing and whatever the heck it was. But again, the wrong words are up on the screen and the piano lady's off into Bach or something. And finally, I'm laughing so hard and people are falling out of their chairs. They're laughing so hard. And I literally stopped in the middle of that and said, how about if we give this up? People went standing ovation crazy. Tape sales, that's another thing we used to have. Tape sales skyrocketed after that service because it was like a comedy album, okay? How discouraged do you think I was after that service? I wasn't discouraged at all. I went, good, there's one more thing I'm not gifted by God to do. I gave my guitar away that night, and I have never led worship again to the glory of God, okay? When you know, yeah, you're applauding because I'm not leading worship. Kurt, come on out. Here's the deal. Most Christians can't celebrate anybody's gifts because they're so insecure about their own. When you know what your gifts are, you can use those and celebrate other people's gifts. And here is another highly gifted person. Give Curt Harlow a Bayside welcome.
Come on, give it up for Pastor Ray. How many agree with me that Pastor Ray should lead worship next week just to prove that point? Okay, so we've decided that each and every one of us that trusts God has got a gift, and we've also decided those gifts are very important. Without them, you cannot exceed your potential. You cannot actually find your purpose. The third question that really is important, well, let me ask it this way. Have you noticed that people have more opinions nowadays? Oh, everyone's got an opinion about who's going to win the NBA, who's going to win the NFL, who's going to win Major League Baseball. By the way, is it weird that all three of those are on at the same time? And I'm going to tell you right now, you know what my opinion is? Kings are going to do a lot better than anyone says they're going to do. They're going to be, but they got opinions on what you should watch on Netflix and how you should vote in November and what the stock market's going to go up. Don't buy good, it's going to go up. Do buy. And everyone's got opinions on how you should diet. They got opinions. I get one more person coming up to me and telling me I can lose weight by eating all fat. I'm gonna punch them. The one thing that people don't have an opinion on is their own spiritual gift. You walk up to anyone that goes to church and say, what's your spiritual gift? And have them be like, I ushered once in 1984. I mean, they just don't know. My friends, of all the things you should have an opinion on, it's what and where are your spiritual gifts. Number 3, write it in. What and where are spiritual gifts in the Bible? Where are they found? What do they mean? What are the categories? And which ones apply to you? It's not difficult to master this. You and I need to spend less screen time and more scripture time finding out the gift that God gave you. If every one of them has them and they're so important, how much more do you and I need to master this material? And it's not difficult. I'm gonna throw a graph up here. You're not gonna be able to read this on the screen, but I did give it to you in your notes, and there's really only 6 major passages in the Bible that you have to know. It's all throughout the New Testament, but there's 6 major places. It's Romans, that's Paul. It's Ephesians, that's Paul. It's Peter, that's Peter. And then it's Corinthians, which is all Paul. Paul is the guy who does most of the talking about spiritual gifts, and it's really easy to understand. In fact, if you'll just read these passages, you'll start to master your spiritual gift because it's obvious what gift you have. It's not a mystery. It's not complex. People around you will start going, you know what? You're good at serving. That's what you do. You're a serving sort of person, or you're a great exhorter. We see this in you. You'll start to recognize it. They'll start to recognize it. You'll start to repeat it. And you are primarily what you tell yourself you are. So you get this information into you, you'll start actually doing it. And that's when your life loses all of its lids. I want to look at the 3 Corinthian chapters for a second, because these are the key biblical chapters. This is the place, and it's kind of interesting how they're put together. You got to understand, each one of these chapters has a theme. The first chapter, 1 Corinthians 12, just go home and read it this week. All 3 of these chapters take you less than 10 minutes to read the whole thing. It has a theme, and the theme is cohesiveness. In other words, God gives different gifts so that we're interdependent on each other. I can't be effective without you. You can't be effective without me. And when we're unified, great and amazing things happen. We're more than the sum of our parts. The theme of 1 Corinthians 14 is effectiveness. It's about constructiveness. It's about how when you and I work together, great things that seem impossible, get done when we work together. These gifts in concert are very effective. Now, what's important to understand is 1 Corinthians 13 is taken wildly out of context all the time. The reason that Paul is writing about gifting in Corinthians is because the church is divided and ineffective. Therefore, he tells them, you have gifts that must be used in unity, and if you do, they're very effective. And the way to use these gifts in unity to be extremely effective is to use them in love. You and I need to tie together the unity and the effectiveness with the attitude of love. And when that happens, it's a game changer. We don't need new fancy strategies in the church to handle a postmodern, post-Christian age where everyone hates Christians. What we need is to learn our gifts and do them in unity with love. See, 1 Corinthians, it's just the only time we read it is at weddings. Stop that. It's totally wrong. Get up there and we're like, beloved. I had to do that. Love is kind, love is gentle, love is on Pinterest. I mean, it's horrible. Do you know the real attitude this is written in? Paul is upset at them for being immature and not putting their gifts into practice. And when they do put their gifts into practice, they're using their gifts against one another, saying, my gift is better than your gift. And Paul is writing and saying, love is not like that. Love is kind, love is gentle, love doesn't keep a record of wrong, you idiots. This is the right attitude. You and I need to get a hold of what our gifting is and apply it in love. Okay, let me look at some categories here because Ray broke this down. This is kind of original material. This is beautiful. I don't think the lists are comprehensive, by the way. What Paul is doing here is going, here's a bunch of different ways you can be gifted. And what we need to do, instead of being really particular or over technical, we need to see what resonates with us category by category. So I want you to take this test right now. As we go through these, I want you to say which one of these 5 areas resonates with me more. The first one is the guiding gifts. This is about people that want to get results. This is about that sort of person who says, hey, I got the end in mind. I don't care how we get there, but we definitely got to get there. We got to get in the end zone. We got to get the results. It's the teacher. It's the apostle, which means builder. It's the leadership. It's the administrative gift. Then there's the next category, which is similar. It's the influencing gifts. These are mostly to do with communication. These are people that answer the question, why should you do something? They motivate people. These are the people that rally other people. They want everyone to get rallied and fired up. The first one is strategic. The second one is more motivation. It's evangelism, it's teaching, and it's preaching. The third one is the fellowship gifts. These are the people that understand that unless we have healthy relationships, none of the motivation and none of the strategic leadership will actually work. They understand that we have to have mercy and we have to pastor people, and we have to practice hospitality, healing, encouragement, and exhortation. These are the people that want healthy, ready for it, relationship. Another R word. Are you catching the theme right now? So if we actually have people that are focused on results, that are rallying each other's hearts, and we do it in healthy relationships, great things happen. Then the fourth category is the task gifts. You see, what happens is at the higher strategic thinking, they often leave out the details. And these are the people that come in behind and go, no, the details are important. These are usually the most important people that get the least amount of attention. These are the people that do great stuff and no one actually ever knows their name. They support God's work and they want it to be done what? Right. These are the people that are like, there's a bunch of spelling errors in the bulletin again. That's craftsmanship, by the way. You're building it correctly. And then there's people that go, listen, these are all great ideas, but unless someone goes out there and works hard and funds it, it's just an idea. It's extremely important. Now, the last group is one of my favorite groups because it's supporting gifts. These are the people that say, we're going to do this gift with other gifts. They're ancillary gifts, they're associative gifts, they're supportive gifts. They complement the other gifts. They want to reinforce the effectiveness of the other gifts. So what these gifts do is they make the other gifts way more powerful. Like for instance, let's just take this gift, wisdom. Wisdom is not a gift. Wisdom isn't, wisdom is I sit in the chair, all right, you may approach me. Bring your algebra homework. No, that's not wisdom. Wisdom joins with another gift and makes that gift proper. Like, for instance, right there, you, sir, what's your name? Doug, because I know you. Yeah. So let's say I have the gift of evangelism. Here's how to do evangelism without the gift of witness. Hey, Doug, I want you to come to my church because your pink shirt reminds me of the blood of Jesus. That would be the evangelism gift without wisdom. Okay, you're not laughing hard enough. You're making me think that you think that's the right way to evangelize people. That's wrong, that's awkward, that's unwise. And so wisdom and all of these gifts reinforce other gifts. Okay, number 3, you have to know the what and the where. So we know that each of us has a gift. We know that those gifts are essential for our potential. We know now where they are and what they are. By the way, I gave you this little gift. It's a little gift assessment. Did you get this coming in? Okay, this is partial. You can get this on the way out if you didn't get it coming in. It's 2 different parts. It's not the whole gift assessment. And I deliberately did that because I know if I gave you the whole gift assessment, some of you would take it and do nothing. And I don't want you to take it and do nothing. I want you to take it and do something. Where do you get the whole test? You have to go to Growth Track. Ha ha, that's right. I'm manipulative on purpose. You have to go to Growth Track because in Growth Track, we give you the whole test on biblical gift assessment. Plus, check this out, plus, we give you the DISC test. And in the DISC test, we actually tell you how your personality affects how the gifts work together. Get to Growth Track, get to Growth Track, get to Growth Track. Number 4, write it in. How do I use my spiritual gifts? How do I use my spiritual gifts? You know, some of you, you're waiting for that lightning experience. You're waiting for Paul on the road to Damascus where he gets knocked off the horse. You're waiting for Isaiah who hears the booming voice of God saying, who should we sing? You know what? You're gonna find your calling. You're gonna live called, not by some dramatic experience. For most of us, it's gonna be by actually just using your gift, by employing the gift. Do you know, that's the way it was for me. I won a scholarship and to get a master's degree, all paid for art, for painting. And 2 years, housing, food, expenses, everything paid. And I told my mom and dad I was gonna do it. I told this guy who was discipling me I was gonna do it. And he said, did you pray about it? And I was like, oh, I come from a family where if people offer you free money, you don't pray about it, you take the money. But it bothered me, so I went home and prayed about it, and I was unsettled. I was unsettled. I don't know, how many here have you ever driven a U-Haul truck before? You ever driven a U-Haul truck with a governor on it? You ever went on I-80 all the way out of the state? And once you get past the beautiful part of Nevada, thank you. I mean, that road is just straight all the way. It's straight and boring, and there's not a mountain or tree to stop the wind from Canada coming down. I mean, the whole thing looks like this. The whole entire thing, just like that. And you're driving just like this. And the wind's coming at you. When you're driving into the wind on a perfectly straight freeway and you're in a U-Haul with only an AM radio, do you know what your top speed with that governor on the engine is? Your top speed is 17 miles an hour, people. 17! That's the way most of you are gonna live your life, with a governor on it. Because you don't have the courage to put into practice your gift. When you put your gift into practice, it takes the governor off, and I don't care what wind blows at you. I prayed, and I felt nothing. But I took a risk. He said to me, if anyone desires leadership, let him first be tested. That's what the Bible says. And he said, Curt, you're a good small group leader. You should at least test this. And based on the fact that he was a good man who had given me good advice and I was unsettled, I took a risk. I didn't have a dramatic experience. I took a risk and I put my gift into practice. I joined a ministerial training program. When I told my parents I was gonna do that, my mom didn't speak to me for 2 years. But listen to me. A couple months in, I woke up one morning and I realized, not in some big revelation, I just realized, this is what I'm meant to do. That was 32 years, and I have not regretted it, and God's not done using me yet, amen? And some of you sitting right now going, oh, that's only a pastor. Pastors all have that story. I wasn't a pastor when I got that story. That's right. It's just the same thing that happened to Ray in that seminary class, and it's the same thing that could happen to you if you put your gift into use. I'm gonna ask Pastor Ray to come out here. He's gonna finish those last 3 fill-ins, and then we got a special surprise for you. Come on out, Pastor Ray.
Good job, man.
Thank you,
So, you ready to write? So 1 Corinthians 12, verses 4, 5, and 6. 1 Corinthians 12, 4, 5, and 6. They're in your notes or in your Bible. And three things jumped out. Okay, go down here. There are different kinds of gifts. That means I activate my gifts. The key word in verse 4 is gifts. Then verse 5, it says there are different kinds of service. How do I activate my gifts? By putting them into service. Another way, I take verse 4 and I go to verse 5. So I take verse 4, which is take my, and put them into service. And then verse 6, here it is, and you will see God-honoring effects. It says this, it says, everyone saw the same God at work. So here's what I do. I take my gifts. I love this. You take verse 4, you go to verse 5, verse 6 happens. Take my gifts, put them into, and God shows up and works. I take my gifts, I put them into service, and God works. And everything's never the same. And if I can make it through this without tearing up too much, I want to give you an example. Just keep your notes out because I'm going to have you go back to page 3. I want to give you an example because some of you are going, oh, that's the secret of life. Verse 4, verse 5, verse 6. Take my, put them into, and God works. But you're going, I'm not a pastor. I can't do that. Over 20 years ago, when we started this church, we had a businessman from the Bay Area, and he and his family moved up. And Frank and Joanne Calton moved up here and started attending this church in our earliest days when we had an overhead projector. And tolerated music and all that kind of stuff because they wanted to see a church in this town that reached kids, teenagers, and they had a heart for that, Young Life, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And the world is full of people that attend church, but they never pick up a bat. They sit in the stands, but they never get on the playing field. Frank's not wired that way. He retired, and he basically said, I want to take my gifts and put them into service. And so he did that here. Now, Frank has two main gifts. Number one, he has a world-class wife, Joanne, who is fun, great sense of humor, and can put up with all of Frank's shenanigans that he made happen all over here and everywhere else. Second is, he has an incredible heart for service. And Frank, early on, way before me, Frank said, we're going to need a church home. And our first meeting, Frank's at it. It's at Steve and Betsy Gall's house, and we went, we need to get some land. And we end up, without Steve, and especially without Frank, we bought 36 acres with a major road that connects to the freeway that way, and that way. You ever thought about that? Incredible location for a church. We bought this for like $1.25 million. You can't buy a parked car in Granite Bay for $1.25 million. And Frank and a team led that. Then we pretty much went, okay, buying land, that was the easy part. Let's build. And so Frank formed a building team. And he formed a land team and then formed a building team. And Frank worked full time on this church building for somewhere between 5 and 8 years, depending on you count it. And we never paid him a dime. He just said, I just want to see God do this. And he took all of his considerable gifts and made it happen. For example, go back to the preceding page. Go to page 3. I want to show you a picture of Frank and us in his living room. We were in his living room a couple months ago. That's Frank now. Frank is 84 and still has all of his hair. It's not fair. Frank, a bunch of us were with Frank, and I want to tell you what Frank's gifts are and how he used those gifts. By the way, look up here for a second. Frank took his gifts and put them into guiding gifts, Frank has leadership gifts and administration gifts. I cannot tell you how many times Frank came in with a brand new administrative plan for this church, and he corralled the sharpest bunch of business people in this church and put them all on a committee and kept them all corralled together going the same direction. Matter of fact, how good was he? He met with every single staff person we had and said, what does your meeting area need to be? Because we're going to build what it needs to be. Amazing. All free, all is volunteer. Okay? Go down to fellowship gifts. Frank had the gift of, by the way, Joanne had the gift of hospitality. We met in their house most of the time. And Frank had the gift of encouragement, which is why I believe, well, I didn't have a dad like Frank. I describe Frank as he's the dad everybody wishes they would have had. And then if you go down to support gifts, wisdom, knowledge, and discernment. We went into a battle, and Frank never ran away from a fight. We went into a battle. We got picketed. We got sued. Channel, everybody was there. It was crazy. And I will never forget this. We go into the first meeting, and there are opponents out with signs saying, "Save Granite Bay. Stop this church." And I actually got up. The first thing I ever said, we have a news clip of this somewhere. Channel 13 got it. I got up and I said, "Hey, I see all these signs, Save Granite Bay. That's why we started this church." And I'm standing. I will never forget this because I'm going, this is insane. This is chaos. Frank, who was older, wiser, and had the gift of knowledge and discernment, he calmed me down and he prepared. I just said, "Frank, this is crazy." Frank said, "Here is exactly what's going to happen. We are going to try to build. The Granite Bay MAC will turn us down. The Planning Commission will turn us down, okay? And the votes will be to the," he said, "then we will go to the supervisors because they really determine whether you vote or not, whether you get it or not. The supervisors will vote for us either 3-2 or 4-1. Then, and that'll take about 3 to 4 years. Then at about 3 or 4 or 5 year mark, he goes, the EIR will be written, the supervisors will vote, and then they will vote for us. We will start to build. We will get sued. We will win the lawsuit, and then we'll build this thing, but it's probably a 5 to 7 year process." Wow. He told me that on day one in the first meeting. The Granite Bay MAC turned us down. The Planning Commission turned us down. The supervisors voted for us 4-1. We got sued. We won the lawsuit. And the way Frank was right on every single account. He had leadership gifts and wisdom's gifts and put them into practice. But he treated people so well that were opponents that one of the opponents was across the street. The very first day we opened up, our first service here, this guy comes walking up to me and I'm going, "Oh, he's going to shoot me." And he comes walking up and he goes, "Do you know who I am?" And I go, "Yeah, I recognize you from the meetings." He goes, "You know, I was against this the whole time." I'm going, "Yeah, that was pretty obvious." He goes, "I really like the way you treated us." He goes, "Since I can walk to church, do you mind if I come to church here?" And I said, "You're the reason we built this church. Welcome home." And that doesn't happen without somebody like Frank leading that. And matter of fact, some of us were with Frank, and I wanted to ask Frank, I actually asked him this question and shot a quick video. Is there anything in the last stages, like he's getting ready to see Jesus pretty quick, is there anything you'd love to say to the church? Because you're sitting in the house that God built through Frank. You're sitting, without Frank, this is not this. And so here, Frank said some amazing things. Check this out. Don't let this guy like here slip out of here without saying whatever he wants to the church. So, Frank, if you would just like to say anything you want to your church family, what would you tell them?
I appreciate everybody that's here, because and you can tell everybody was here because you participated in this. And so the first thing I want to say is that I didn't do this alone. I had a lot of help, and that was continuously encouraging, and particularly on the original committee where everybody was a volunteer. And some of those volunteers still meet on Tuesday nighs. Wow. And we had a men's group, and it's still meeting.
And to the church.
The other thing I want to say is pray. Because if we don't get the Lord of the universe on our side, you know, the human part will take over, and you can't let that happen.
And Frank, as we've talked about this, you're going, I'm going to be seeing Jesus pretty soon. And you have a verse you shared with us. Could you share with our church what you told us about this verse? This is really good.
Philippians 1:21, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain.
So,
And that's a profound verse, and I don't care where we are in our life. The hard part is for me to live as Christ. The question being, how do we do that in our present day circumstances? And I think that's why we have small groups, because you can hold each other accountable on that. But we all know that in the final analysis that when we die and go see Jesus, that we're better off.
Wow.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Amen.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, on behalf of, first of all, on behalf of Carol and I,
yeah.
you guys dove in early and had our back 24/7.
Yep.
You have stayed, you and Joanne, you've stayed faithful to God. You've stayed faithful to your values, which is why your kids want to live near you, and your grandkids and your great-grandkids. Everybody wants to be around you. And you've stayed faithful to our church, and you have set things in motion that are going to have a ripple effect for a long, long, long time.
Well, as long as you interpret you as plural, I'm happy with that. Y'all, I think somebody would
Y'all,
say.
there we go.
Y'all.
That's right. So anyway, we want to say thank you for everything you've done for Bayside. So
Thank you,
Thank
Frank.
you.
So,
Thank you.
it's great.
God bless.
Okay, God bless. Thanks. Frank. Take your gifts, put them into service, and the fastest growing church north of Los Angeles finally has a home. And Frank also had a pet project here. Frank was like, everything else, he goes, this is my deal, and it's the 3 crosses. That was Frank's personal pet project. The rocks, those gorgeous rocks that are out there, were all rocks that Frank found on our property and had dug up, and we used our own rocks here from that. Granite Bay is easy to find rocks. And the crosses there, and if you want to know the crosses, we didn't want to put up, we talked to Frank. Frank did not want a big showy cross sticking up in the sky. He wanted something that was approachable, where people could come to the cross and walk up to the cross. We also, if you take our property, the cross is right in the center of our property. It is dead center of who we are. And that was Frank's pet project. And so what we did was we decided, we have never done this before. We decided we would honor Frank by putting a plaque on one of the rocks he placed there. And so we have had a bronze plaque made. It looks like this. The 3 crosses dedicated to Frank Calton. For me to live as Christ and to die as gain. And after the service today, by the way, this is a second one, and we are giving this to Joanne and to Frank to take home to their own house. But we have had one installed, and this is the service. After this service, we're going out to the crosses and unveiling it, if you'd like to join us out there and see this. But I thought it would be appropriate to say, Joanne, you took it on the chin when your husband disappeared for 7 years. And if you would just stand up, we want to say thank you and God bless you. And just, we love you, appreciate you. And I've grilled Frank about this. If you talk to Frank, he would go, one of the most blessed seasons of my entire life was what happened here at this church because of what he did. I believe this, if you take your gifts and you put them into, something will exist because of you. Someone will be in heaven because of you. Someone will be encouraged because of you. Why would you want to live any other way?